Hey everyone, super excited for this chat with Nick Lippis, world-renowned expert, authority on all things IP networking, enterprise IT, and beyond, and founder and chairman of the Open Network Users Group. Nick, how are you?
I'm excellent, Evan. So happy to be here with you and also your community as well.
Well, thanks so much for joining. And I've followed your career, gosh, for a couple decades at this point. But for
Mm.
the folks who maybe are new to you and ONUG, the community you have kind of built with your collaborators, maybe give us a little biography and the mission, the backstory of the
Yeah.
Open Network Users Group.
Okay, yeah, I won't bore you, but it's like ONUG is like now the largest community of IT business leaders that meet, regularly. We meet like twice a year, once in Dallas, once and also once in fall. That's in New York City and Manhattan. We're going to be in Hudson Yards in late October, October 24th and 25th. We had our first meeting of the year in Dallas. That was in early May. So ONUG was it came together with myself and a gentleman named Ernest Leffner. And Ernest was at Fidelity at the time. And
Mm,
this is like 11 years ago. And Ernest came up to me, at another conference, and he basically said, Nick, was like, there's like all this change going on. And at that time in the networking industry, we were talking about white boxes, right? And he's like, there's no group, no place where we can go to actually talk to each other,
mm.
so why don't we, pull together a meeting and see how it goes? And so he offered up Fidelity. So we did Fidelity in Boston, and we were like, we had a couple of pages on a website and kind of word of mouth, and then 120 people showed up, and we had 10 startup companies. We only asked startup companies to basically demonstrate, and it was a huge success. And so we started to roll it from there. We started adding to the board, and then we started to have regular meetings, and our topics just started to be a mirror image of the overall marketplace. And now we're, the last ONUG, there were like 1,600 people, 600 companies, 55 countries, so it's
Wow.
really gotten pretty big, knock on wood. So,
No, it's fabulous, and I've been following it for years. And so, how do you advocate for open, interchangeable, software-defined sort of solutions? What's the ethos there exactly
yeah,
behind the
Evan,
team?
great question. And also too is that like that's the old mission.
Mhm.
We kind of updated the mission to really be the voice of the IT consumer.
Mm,
Really the mission. And so because like the things that we were talking about, they're both, there are things that are open and there are things that are not open, and there are
mm,
things that we want to promote, like in terms of like market development and market enablement. And actually, we do a lot of the market enablement right now. So and so we're kind of ahead of the standards curve. Right. Usually, you have something that's in place for a while, and then you understand it, and then you standardize on it. So anyway, what was more, I think, important to the community was that we have really two assets, as part of the community. One is a voice, and there's, a lot of folks, would basically say is that, even the largest of corporations, whether you're like J.P. Morgan Chase or Bank of
mm.
America, you can get the best discount from any vendor, right? It's like you're going to get the best pricing, but you can't bend the curve. You can't
Mm.
change the way in which they're offering services. And to do that, you need a community. So it was so that voice, that collective voice is really important. And the other thing too is that they have really, really deep pockets, but really short arms, So the bottom line is that there's a pot of gold at at every ONUG, and you just have to kind of navigate and figure out how to get to it.
Oh, that's a great point. I love the analogy. And explain how the group works, the working groups, the collaboration, the change of ideas. Like, what does it look like internally behind the curtain?
Yeah, so like there's the ONU collaborative, and that's really where all the working groups happen, and that's a steering committee that manages that. That steering committee has companies, let's see, Raytheon, FedEx, Fidelity, Cigna, HSBC,
Wow.
a group, a whole bunch of other, companies that are participating. We also brought all the cloud providers into that. Cisco is on that steering committee as well. And that steering committee oversees the work that gets done in the various different working groups. And there are about 250 members within the working group. So there's a working group on cloud security, and that's called Cloud Security Notification Framework. We're doing a large hackathon at fall, ONUG on that. There's also another working group on policy as code. So they're actually going to publish a glossary coming up in the fall. There's the NAS, or Network as a Service group. They're doing a kind of best practices and kind of a thought leadership, like how do you think about NAS? Because there's so many different markets, like there are the cloud providers, the service providers, the on-prem providers that are trying to provide a NAS service. So what are those different consumption models? And then what are the use cases? That's what's happening in there. There's another group on hyper automation. They're developing a full stack observability platform.
Wow.
That might turn out to be an open source project.
Wow.
And then there's a new group that's forming. It hasn't been established yet, but we have the charter for it, and that's on private 5G. So those working groups, they meet like every Tuesday. There's work, and they meet very regularly. There's dedicated Slack channels for them, and the way that they get established is that the community submits use cases that they're working on and that they're having problems with. And so those use cases then they get voted on, and the top votes, get to be candidates for a working group. And if a working group has a chairperson, has a sponsor, then we move forward with it. So
Brilliant.
it really kind of grounds up.
Oh, I love it. Love the grassroots nature of things. I'm curious, how do you and how do your members really stay current with so much that's going on? I mean, not everyone can spend 15 hours a day consuming news like I do as a news junkie, a tech news junkie. I mean, what's your advice there for staying on top of enterprise IT trends and opportunities and changes? I imagine that's part of the mission as well.
Yeah, they got to follow your Twitter.
I'm not sure that's the best approach. How would you maybe boil that down maybe a bit for?
I think, it's like when you're a practitioner, you're dealing with these issues all the time. And so it's not like you don't need to read too much news, because you're dealing with a whole set of issues, so the technology intimately, and then you also know your organization and how you're trying to change or kind of extract that technology to create business value. And so I think that there's an inherent, learning that you get from just dealing with this technology on a day-to-day basis and the organizations, that you have and so forth. So I think, it's interesting too, because actually many of the ONUG community members that attend the meetings, they'll only go to an ONUG once a year or twice a year. They won't go to anything else. It's like, this is the place where they meet to meet their peers. And to really learn from each other, because they don't want to learn. They'll learn from the vendor community about, a product that they bought and they need to get certified and everything else, right? But to really understand what's working, what's not working, that's going to come from their peers. That's not going to come from an analyst. That's not going to come from, the vendor community. That's really going to come from their peers. And they have this insight that really goes undocumented in our industry. And it's like, how do all these building blocks work when you stitch them together? And they're all from these different companies, and they all have these different, management models, and, and they're all increasingly being, interwoven and interconnected. And so they understand really where the big gaps are, and they understand where the problems are. And so they use ONUG to try to get those problems resolved and addressed. So
that's fantastic. Well, best of breed, and I love that approach to, building solutions. And describe some of, how the members collaborate and work together. For example, the private 5G initiative is really interesting and timely for me. There's so much excitement and opportunity around those areas. So what would that initiative look like?
Yeah, so like in that, so in the private 5G, the reason why we're doing that is that there's a lot of interest from the community as they start to think about Wi-Fi 6, 6E, Wi-Fi 7, and now there's, Open RAN, and so you have like this alternative, high bandwidth, alternative that's more secure than Wi-Fi, and so there's a huge amount of interest in, okay, well, why don't we build this out? And you see it already happening in particular market segments, like Caterpillar has their own private 5G network. Ford has one. There's probably about at least 50 to 75 companies that we've kind of tracked that have their own private 5G. But I think, from our point of view, it's like what our community is looking for is that, how do we think about this? What is the construct, look like? What does the deployment models look like? How do we connect 5G from a management and control plane, maybe with our Wi-Fi management and control plane? How do we extend it to public 5G, or enterprise 5G that a service provider might be selling? So they're really looking for clarity around the approach, and use cases and proof points about the value proposition. And that value proposition really comes from reliability and security. That's really, really it.
I love that. You work side by side, obviously, with your members. What are they telling you in terms of their biggest challenges as enterprise IT buyers? Like, what's their, day-to-day life like these days? It must be, it's quite frenetic.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to kind of like just pinpoint one or two issues, but I think I'll go with this. I think over the last 5 years, that's really when enterprises started consuming cloud, and organized, for it. So, how do you deal with governance, and how do you deal with risk, and who's building it, who's responsible for it, what does it cost, all of those, things. It's so I think they're kind of at the end of that 5-year journey, and they're now pushing the assessment button. And okay, does this really work? And I think a lot of them are in that evaluation process right now. They understand that it isn't less costly at all, and they've known that for a long time. They also know that they're not getting operational efficiency, right? So they don't have less staff now than they did in the beginning, and that was the other value prop. And then the other thing is the agility. So the agility, what they all wanted is elasticity, right? So I can scale up and I can scale down. Well, they can scale up really good, but when it comes to scaling down, then all of a sudden the lawyers get involved, and it's like, all right, wait a minute here. It's like, so that three-part value proposition is being really kind of scrutinized, and they understand, okay, you can kind of lead from behind, put an application into the cloud and then experiment with it, but I think they are now at a place where multi-cloud is becoming more and more important, because they want to be able to offer options and choices to their developers, right? So their developers want to build the applications that they are required to develop business value. And that might be on GCP, it might be on AWS, it might be on Azure, Oracle, what have you. And so, to have a multi-cloud infrastructure that enables the kind of the picking and choosing, from the developers is really important to them, and also for security and networking teams. So, okay, one other thing. So there's that whole thing about getting getting control, over cloud. In that process, too, is that they've all realized is that what's happened is that normally there would be a centralized group called kind of the Cloud Center of Excellence, right, or a platform group. That group would do the application development, they would put it into the cloud, they would try to do operations until it would break. And what would break would usually be something around networking or security. And then they go to like the networking groups or the security groups that we're mostly dealing with on-prem, and they would ask them, hey, could you figure out what's going on with this thing? And so they would work it. And then once it was done, and operational, then the platform team didn't want to own it anymore. They wanted that group to own it, right? Now, also too, is that during the build-up, those teams were asking the silo teams for help, but those teams mostly were saying, I'm not going to own this. I'm not going to be running it. So I don't want to have any input into it in case the whole thing blows up. And I don't want to be sucked into that. So there was a lot of friction, and it still is there today, a lot of friction between those two groups. But now what's occurring is that the network and the security teams, cybersecurity teams, are increasingly taking responsibility for cloud infrastructure and its integration with on-prem. And that's really where it should be. And so I think now that, that those groups, they need new tools to do this. They need new best practices. They need new skill sets. And so that's a big area that we're focusing on at ONUG, is to expose those teams towards those kind of tools and best practices and organizational models so that they can be successful in that endeavor. So
fantastic mission. And tell us about the big event coming up in New York City in October. What's the format? Is it open to members and non-members or vendors, or how does that work with ONUG?
Yeah, so we'll have so it's open to the public. Anybody can attend. Most of the members, attend. I'd say probably like 80% of the members will attend. We have a pretty sizable list, and so the a couple of key things. So maybe kind of like size of it. So it should be between 800 and 1,000 people. About 40 to 50 sponsors. Will be there. There'll be another couple thousand that'll be plugged in online as well. Large hackathon, happening at this one. So that'll be a lot of fun around cloud security. The key thing that we're going to be doing at this one too is that there's I'm sure, Evan, that there's about 700,000 open recs, for cybersecurity professionals and networking professionals, right? So there's a major shortage in the industry. So we're going to spend a good amount of time on, okay, well, what does AGI and also LLM can it do for our industry? So automation is a really important component. And part of that is the whole full stack observability. So we'll be talking full stack observability. NAS will be also big on the table. Cloud security is on the table, and organization design. So we're going to have some really great presentations. I can't mention them yet. I'm sorry.
I'm sure we'll touch base closer to the time, but thank God we can go to New York again, not Vegas or Orlando for once, for a great enterprise IT event. That sounds like quite a treat. That's a time to shine. Of course, it wouldn't be an event without talking about generative AI. That was actually an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day about how a lot of CEOs are kind of fed up with every vendor just talking about Gen AI. Have we tilted too far towards the excitement and hype side of Gen AI? And what's the balance that
I don't think
practitioners should be considering?
Yeah, I don't think we reached the hype curve yet.
Okay.
I think we're still in it for a while. I think, for example, at ONU, they're practitioners. So they're really into practical perspectives, So for example, there's a really great community member called Andy Brown. So Andy used to be the CTO over at UBS and a few other financials, and he runs Sandhill East, now. So he's going to do one of the keynotes, and he's going to do AGI with Phil T. So Phil T did. What's the name of the company? It's Moo. Oh, I'm sorry, Phil. I forget the name of your company. But
we'll ask ChatGPT after the call. Yes.
Yeah, it's like a cow, Moo something. But anyway, he has, I don't know, about 22 AI patents, and
wow.
So it's going to be Phil, Andy, and then also one of the CTOs at JPMC around what they're doing. So we're going to have a really good discussion, a practical discussion about really what can you do and what might you be able to do like in the next couple of years with AGI to kind of solve a lot of these, not just the IT operational problems, but also where else in the enterprise operations will AGI kind of like come in and where will it provide benefit. So
super exciting.
Curve, Evan. Yeah, I think we still have about a good year I think left in.
Well, good to know. I'm not falling behind. We're halfway through the summer here. Can't believe September is going to be right around the corner. What are you looking forward to the rest of the summer, personally, professionally? travel wise. You're in Massachusetts here as well, so I think we're both trying to get some nice summertime in. But
Yeah.
beyond that, what's on the radar?
I think it's fishing. I did,
Fishing's good.
kind of a seawater, ocean fisherman. So anyway, so fishing actually tomorrow. A couple of trips to Nantucket, maybe to the vineyard.
Nice.
You gotta hit the Wellfleet Beachcomber. At least 4 or 5 times, like during the summer. You can't go summer without one. And then just spending time with family and friends. It's
Yeah, well, it's our time to thrive here in the summer. That's really
yeah,
our key time. So enjoy it. Thanks so much for sharing, your vision and mission at ONUG. And everyone, thanks for watching. Please
yeah.
spread the word and reach out on Twitter. Nick is pretty prolific as well as a tweeter and content creator. So look forward to your feedback. Thanks so much, Nick.
Evan, thank you.